Okay, my Math 1 class, we are going to be continuing to talk about finding the slope when given both graphs and when just given 2 points. Okay, so if you really think about it, it's giving us the same thing. It means the same thing. Up here, we've been given 2 points on a graph, right? Down here, we've just been given the 2 points. So, when finding the slope, on a graph especially, we always want to think what? So let's go ahead and underline slope. Okay, we always want to think rise over run. Okay, so that's going to help us find our slopes when counting. Okay, so let's look at number 1. If I'm thinking rise over run, and I need to find this slope, let me zoom in for you. For number 1. Okay, well, first of all, the first question let's ask ourselves is this slope going to be positive or negative? Okay, remember, it's going down and to the right. Okay, so is this slope going to be positive or negative? Okay, it's going to be negative because, remember, when it's going down equals negative. Down and to the right equals a negative slope. So we know it's going to be negative. So I'm just going to put that negative right there in front right now because we know our answer is going to be negative. Okay, so now let's use our rise over run to count from point to point. So I always like starting with the lower one because we're always going to rise first. So if we start with this lower one right here, we need to rise until we get to the same line that our second point is on. So I'm going to rise 1, 2, 3, and 4 until I get to that same line that my second point is on. Okay, so we rose 4. Okay, well, how many are we going to run now? So now we're going to run 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we have a negative 4 over 4. Okay, our very last step is to see if we can reduce this. So what is negative 4 divided by 4? It's going to give me a negative 1. So our slope for number 1 reduces to negative 1. Okay, so let's do the same thing for number 2. So we're given a graph that tells us we need to use rise over run. Okay, first thing, is this going to be a positive or a negative slope if it's going down and to the right? Remember, down always is negative slope. So I'm going to put that negative sign right out there in front, first thing. Okay, so let's go ahead and from our bottom point, we're going to rise before we run. So let's rise 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we rose 4. And now we're going to run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so our slope is negative 4 over 5. Can we reduce this anymore? Or is there a number besides 1 that goes into 4 and 5? No, so we don't have to reduce it. So our answer is just negative 4 over 5. Okay, let's look at number 3. Okay, so number 3 and 4 kind of look like the ones on My Open Math, where it doesn't give us 2 points. Okay, you see how on number 1 and 2 it gave us these points, these little dots? Well, on 3 and 4 it doesn't give us these points. So let's find a point ourselves. Okay, so we want to find where the line perfectly lines up in a corner of a box. Okay, I see one right there. Okay, right there. And you only need 2, but just in case you want another one, oh, they're right there. And another one right there. Okay, so we want to find where it perfectly lines up in the corner. Okay, so once we do that, we only need to count from one point to another point. So we're going to do the same thing. Rise over run. Is this slope going to be positive or negative? Okay, think if it's going down, it's going to be negative. So I'm going to put that negative right there in front. Okay, and from the lowest point, which is actually right here, I'm going to rise 1 to my next point. So rise 1 and run 1, 2, 3. Okay, well, our slope is never going to change. So let's see if that's the same from this point to that point. Rise 1, yep, and run 1, 2, 3. So we're good. Okay, can we reduce -1/3? Can that get any smaller? Nope. So our slope is just -1/3. Okay. Same thing for number 4. It's given us a graph, but we don't quite have any points on there yet. So let's find where we have some points. Okay, so perfectly in a corner right there. Kind of. You can see that it's almost right in that corner. I want it perfectly and right there. Okay. So we have 2 points that we've put on this graph. So we're going to do the same thing. We have rise over run. Okay, now is this slope going to be positive or negative? This time the line is going up and to the right. So we know our slope is going to be positive. So we don't need a negative sign. We also don't need a positive sign, right? So we can go ahead and just get right into our rise over run. So from our lowest point, we're going to rise 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we're going to rise 7, and then we need over our run. So from this point, we're going to run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So our slope for this one is 7/6. We cannot reduce it anymore, so that is our slope. Perfect. Okay, for 5 through 10, we need our slope formula. So let's go ahead and copy down our slope formula. So our slope formula is always y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, well, just like we did last time, coordinate points are always listed x, comma, y. X, comma, y. X always comes first. Okay, well, we get the 1s and the 2s by saying, well, this is my first coordinate point, so this is going to be x1 and y1. And this is my second coordinate point, so this is going to be x2 and y2. Okay, so knowing that, let's go ahead and label all of our coordinate points. So on 6, we have x1, y1, and x2, y2. Okay, same thing on 7, x1, y1, x2, y2. 8, x1, y1, x2, y2. Number 9, x1, y1, x2, y2. And number 10, x1, y1, x2, y2. Okay, so we have them all labeled, so that's going to actually help us solve. So looking at number 5, instead of writing out our formula, I want us to copy it down, but don't put y2 and y1. Put the blank spaces. Okay, so I'm going to put y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, and we're going to solve. We're going to figure out what this is. Okay, so let's fill in our top one. What number is above y2? Going to be 8. So I'm going to fill in 8 for that spot. And what number is over y1? 1. Okay, let's look at the bottom. x2 is going to be 14 and x1 14. Okay. So now let's just solve. So we have 8 minus 1 is going to be 7 on top. What is 14 minus 14? That is 0. Okay, remember, whenever we have a 0 on bottom, okay, remember that's like saying something is going to disappear, dividing it into 0 pieces. Okay, well, that is not possible. So we call that undefined, or in My Open Math, so on your computer, DNE for does not exist. Okay, so for number 5, we know it's undefined slope or does not exist. because of that 0 on bottom. Okay, so let's do the same thing for number 2. Okay, fill in your formula. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, and we're going to figure out what that is. Okay, so my first spot is going to be my y2 spot, and that's going to be 10. Okay, my second spot is y1, and that's going to be 15. Okay, down here is my x2 spot, negative 8. Subtract my x1, which is negative 9. Okay, so let's go ahead and solve. On top we have 10 minus 15, which is going to give me negative 5. And then on bottom we have negative 8 minus a negative 9. What happens with this double negative you see right here? Turns into a positive. Okay, the 8 is still negative because that sign's in front, but because we have these two negatives right next to each other, they become addition. So what is negative 8 plus 9? That's going to give me a positive 1. Okay, and because we can reduce or rewrite negative 5 over 1 as just negative 5, that is our answer. Okay, let's do it again for number 7. We have y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. We're going to figure out what it equals. Okay, so my first spot is my y2 spot. That's going to be a negative 15. Subtract my y1, which is 19. Okay, down here is my x2 spot, and that's going to be 8. Minus my x1, which is negative 1. Okay, so let's solve the top. We have negative 15 minus 19 more. Okay, so we're getting more negative here. Negative 15 minus 19 more. And this is going to give us negative 34. Okay, on bottom we have 8 minus a negative 1. Okay, again, we have these double negatives right next to each other. What does it turn into? Positive. So now we have 8 plus 1 is 9. Okay, negative 34 over 9 can't be reduced anymore, so it stays negative 34 over 9. Perfect. Okay, let's look at number 8. Same thing. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 equals, we're going to figure that out. My first spot is my y2 spot, 6 minus my y1, which is 10. And on bottom are my x's, negative 11 for x2 and 15 for x1. Okay, so I have 6 minus 10, which is going to give me negative 4. And on bottom I have negative 11 minus 15 more. So we're getting more negative here. That's going to give me a negative 26. Okay, so now on this guy, a couple things can be reduced. So whenever we have a negative on top and bottom, or think a negative divided by a negative, turns into a positive, or just cancels each other out. Okay, and we can reduce it because both of these numbers are even numbers, which means we can divide them both by 2. Okay, 4 divided by 2 is going to give me 2. 26 divided by 2 is going to give me 13. Okay, they're both not even anymore, so that is as reduced as it'll go. Perfect. 2 more examples. Okay, same thing. Let's do our y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, let's fill in our spaces. y2 is negative 5. y1 is negative 12. x2 is negative 9. And x1 is 20. Okay, let's solve for the top. We got negative 5 minus 12, or minus a negative 12, okay? What do these double negatives right next to each other turn into? Positive. So we have negative 5 plus 12. Okay, so we're getting into the positives. What, Holly? Is it for Rand?
I'll come back.
Okay. Negative 5 plus 12. We're going to go into the positives, and we are going to end at 7. Okay, so now let's solve for the bottom. We have negative 9 minus 20 more. So we're getting more negative here. This is going to be negative 29. Okay, there's no numbers that we can divide both of those guys by, so it stays negative 7 over 29, or 7 over negative 29. Okay, last example. Fill in your formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. We're going to figure out what that is. Okay, so fill in your blanks. y2 is negative 5. y1 is 7. x2 negative 14. And x1 negative 16. Okay, let's solve for the top. Negative 5 minus 7 more, so we're getting more negative here. That's going to be a negative 12. Okay, and then the bottom one, we have a negative 14 subtracting a negative 16. What do those double negatives turn into? A positive. So I have negative 14 plus 16, and that is going to give me a positive 2. Okay, we can reduce negative 12 over 2. This turns into, if we divide them both by 2, or think negative 12 divided by 2, that's going to give me a negative 6 over 1, or just negative 6. And there we go. There are your notes for today. You have an assignment that goes along with it. Make sure you submit them on Canvas.